Hey everyone, welcome back to Altengrad City in City Skylines. So, we won't build anything today, but we will look at the behind the scenes of the previous war episode where we saw the story of Altengrad throughout the Second World War. I will go over some places in the city, show you what happened to them and why, and also let you see how some of the things were made. Alright, so I don't have absolutely everything recorded from doing the war episode because I just didn't think that it's gonna be needed, but some things I did record, so, those are the things that we will look at. Now, this is one of the most important changes in the city, and in the war episode I wanted to make it look like this was kind of an accidental target when the Allied bombers just targeted the industrial areas of Altengrad. That's what I showed with that reconnaissance flight and taking the pictures of the city, circling the targets and something like that. But this part of the city was, we will never know. Was it an accident? Was it an intentional doing or something like that? But in any case, the result is that the old bridge in the city got damaged. And it got damaged quite heavily on this newer part of the waterfront. So a couple of arches of the bridges completely collapsed, and obviously there was a tram line over the bridge that is now separated from, the rest of the city. So the city is actually hit quite badly with this because at this point in time, there are not that many connections over the river. And this was one of the most important ones, especially for public transport and pedestrians, definitely pedestrians. As you can see even here, a lot of people were using this bridge in City Skylines. So we will have to do something about it. I should probably mention that in the next episode of Altengrad, we are going to return to building and we will do some kind of repairs to the city. But anyway, why did I choose this place? Now, I definitely needed to make the war episode slightly realistic in a way that, the damage is going to be concentrated on the strategic assets of the city. And that would obviously be industry. Now, the city could have definitely been a lot more damaged. I have seen that in the comments. And I definitely agree that, when it comes to realism, the city should have been a bit more damaged, well, quite a lot more actually, but at the end of the day I kind of built it and I didn't want to completely flatten it, so I'm just going to do some of these places and that's pretty much going to be it. Yeah, sure, I agree, it would have been a lot more realistic to just flatten whole blocks of the city, but this is just what we do. Now, the reason I chose this place is that I definitely needed to destroy some of the more iconic places in the city. Now, what is the most iconic place of Altengrad? The castle, maybe the old town, something like that. But, those were not exactly military targets. Well, this one isn't either, but the castle, I don't really have any plans for the castle. If you take a look at, other old European cities, you have these kinds of castles or things kind of intact since medieval times, and no one really wanted to, put highways through them or something like that. Maybe there is a city like that, I don't know, but most of them definitely didn't. But this place in Altengrad is kind of an important junction of all kinds of roads and everything, and this kind of leads me to explain how I'm planning the series to go forward. So we are obviously seeing the series in a bit chronological order, right? How it's supposed to be. But in my head, I'm thinking I already have a plan how I want the city to look in the modern times. And with these kinds of, especially with the war damage and all kinds of changes that I'm planning in the coming decades, I'm going to be kind of getting towards that vision that I have for future Altengrad. So I'm kind of justifying that future look of the city by doing these, especially the war damage and all the different changes that we are going to see in the future. And also, this place was, at least in my opinion, kind of iconic for the city, and I definitely wanted to have the war damage have some impact, right? Maybe on you as a viewer as well, so that you saw those. I remember clearly when I was building this place, I showed you that nice view of the trams going into the gatehouse right there and, through the arch. And it was just looking very cute. I was saying how I really, really enjoyed looking at this place, but, war is kind of rough. So we needed to have some of these, iconic places in the city just destroyed, because what would be the point? Destroying all the industrial areas, that's like okay, but obviously those are going to be refurbished because industry is important. They are going to put it the way it was before the war, but these kinds of medieval places, no one is really going to reconstruct that, right? It's like a historic area that's just gone, once it's destroyed. So I definitely needed to do something like it, but at the same time I didn't want to flatten the rest of the city, so I picked this one. Now, the way I did it, I basically, well, this probably ties to how I actually recorded all of this. Back when I planned this episode, it was like a very strange coincidence that there actually was the effects module released for procedural objects, which included even explosions and smoke and fire and all these kinds of effects that I absolutely 100% needed to make this happen, especially the explosions for the nighttime bombardments. So that was very useful, and that's how I did those nighttime shots. By the way, the video, the war episode, has like minimum like post editing, right? It only has a couple of edits because, for example, the module effects have like a maximum delay of 10 seconds. Some of the explosions were actually repeating themselves in the shots, so I had to record it without them and then with them and kind of mask it over it so that the explosions wouldn't just cycle back and happen again in the shots. You can probably see that in some of the videos because some of the shots are a bit strange in this regard, but it's like a minor detail. Now, this gatehouse, that was like the biggest iconic place in this part of the city. So I wanted to kind of stick it from the rubble, at least the tower. Like there, I split it into two parts, make it look like the metal top of the spire kind of fell from the building and got warped and whatever as it fell into the rubble. So it's there, just sitting in there, sticking through it. I really thought that the shot overlooking this place, how it was damaged, was really good. Was really good. It turned out looking fine. Now, for doing all this, I'm actually using a lot of vanilla assets because I'm not really sure, but I think that these piles that I'm using right here, the rubble is actually vanilla. I'm not really super sure about it. If it's something from the workshop and you are the asset creator, then I'm really sorry. But this is definitely vanilla. So I downloaded for this purpose a mod called Building States, I believe. And it's basically a mod that lets you make the buildings abandoned or destroyed. Like, for example, when they get flooded in the basic game or something like that, right? But you can control that. You can really just click the building and make it destroyed, and it's going to create those ruins. Because otherwise, in the game, I was not exactly sure how to do the ruining. You could have seen me there in the beginning do a couple of remnants of walls, because there are, I think Beard Monkey made a lot of these different assets for like construction sites, but I didn't really find anything for like destroyed buildings. There are a couple of things. They actually started popping up in the workshop right when I recorded the episode, but nothing like big that I could use, for more variation and things. So I kind of needed to improvise a lot, and at the end I was just using most of the rubble, and it makes it look like the buildings kind of disappeared a bit more than I would like. So the heights of the piles of rubble should have been probably a bit higher, but it's like what I'm doing in here, and with the war episode, it's definitely pushing the limits of City Skylines, because this is obviously something that's completely off from what it's supposed to be, right? Now, another place that needed to be damaged, because this is kind of an industrial area, it was like an obvious target, was the harbor. And this was actually kind of simpler to make because there are not that many buildings. There are a couple of warehouses. I just made them converted into procedural objects, make the textures a bit mangled, make the roofs a bit, caved in or something like that, and then just create a whole bunch of these craters. And this is actually where I ran into an issue, because I was doing this on the live stream, well, not this, but I was on the live stream measuring, for example, the sizes of craters on old 1945 maps of Prague. And I think I arrived at the conclusion that the craters were well, I don't remember the exact values, but they were actually kind of small. So, and there were a lot of them, like in one line, which was probably created by one squadron of a plane or something. There were like a lot of the craters, but unfortunately the mesh of the map of the terrain in City Skylines is not exactly going to allow you to create these kinds of small craters. I was using the terraforming networks and I was really trying to make them as small as possible, but I could not really make them that tiny. So this is like something that I'm not really proud of, because the craters are just way too big, but well, they are the smallest they can be actually when you take into consideration the limits of of the terrain. So that's a bit unfortunate, but at the end of the day it's actually good, because I'm using a single dirt decal inside of these craters and it perfectly fits that size. So, in a way that's kind of good, I suppose. But yeah, I would admit that it's not exactly realistic, because there are not enough of these craters just around the city. But it's kind of a detail, because at the end of the day, what's most important output or result of the previous episode is obviously the damage, because the damage is obviously going to stay with us. A lot of these old buildings are just never going to come back, clearly, and something new is going to pop up instead of them, or it's going to be like a motivation to maybe even rework some of these city blocks entirely, because I suppose it's no surprise at this point that Altengrad is going to fully end up in the eastern block. I think I talked about this sometime before, but a lot of people were asking about that in the comments, so I 100% will do that, so that it's going to happen there, which means that, there's going to be some political changes as well, which is going to influence the urban planning of the city. There's not going to be that much issue with just leveling whole city blocks to make way for certain different projects. And obviously, if the blocks were kind of half leveled during the war already, then, that's, I suppose, even easier. That's kind of like a very rough explanation what's going to come, but, it is what it is. Now, the next place, and this was actually super difficult to do, was the industrial area. Now, the industrial area, again, obvious target, the biggest industrial place in the city. The same happened with Prague, for example. Lots of the industrial areas towards the east, northeast area of the city were really, really badly hit during the war. Unfortunately, together with some residential areas around them. But, that's kind of what I did in Altengrad as well. I'm definitely going to be talking about that in the next episode, because we are just going to return there and create some kind of like repairs or something. Now, these kinds of buildings, unlike the smaller footprint buildings in the city, the medieval buildings even, those I could definitely afford to just completely delete and just put some kind of pile of rubble instead of them. But these big construction halls, they would obviously not do that, and even in real life, if you take a look at some footage of like destroyed places in cities during wars, you don't really see just buildings completely flattened, right? Just piles of rubble. But you see like the outline walls maybe still there with just, windows, not really looking inside the building, but you seeing the sky through the windows, right? But you see them, right? And in City Skylines, that's not exactly possible. So I had to convert parts of these buildings into procedural objects, extract just the outer walls, and then somehow treat the inside of the building, because obviously this is a manufacturing area. It's huge inside. It has a huge footprint, but there was nothing inside of the building. Well, there was like a train station in there, but that's not really relevant. So I had to put all these rubble pieces in there, which is kind of looking weird more you look at it, because this building would be like mostly made of steel, some kind of steel structures for the roof, and the actual volume of construction materials compared to the volume of the building was not really that big. So that area was really difficult to put together, but eventually I kind of applied the good old detailing trick, just put as many elements there as possible, and eventually it's going to look good. And, don't look at it for that long in the cinematics, so that people don't have the time to just, catch all the inconsistent details, and it's gonna be good. And I think, you know, it was eventually okay. So a couple of procedural objects there for making the roof here and there kind of caved in and make it look like the building is not like totally destroyed, and lots of the pipelines all around, maybe even some crates and things like that. Also, you could have seen me do the barricade there. The barricade was done with obviously moving the Tiger tank over it, like, you know, frame by frame. Well, not frame, but, you know, just moving it, recording it, moving it, recording it, stuff like that. Now, this is something that's actually possible with the new effects module in procedural objects. So this scene I did by basically stopping all those effects. Then I paused the game, didn't move the camera, was very careful to not move the camera, then activate all these effects, the gravity module and the fire effect and everything, and then turn it all off. Then go back into the cinematic camera, making sure that it is already off, because I was recording this for like, you know, 10 times or something. And once the camera settles, just unpause the simulation, and there we go. That's going to be the effect. Unfortunately, the turret, as you can see, is just going to go through the terrain, so that's not exactly realistic. So I unfortunately had to cut the shot just when the gun was just starting to clip through the cobblestone. So you know, but eventually, again, it's like a special effect rule, you know, for the old time movies. Like, if you are doing special effects, just don't show them for that long, so that people don't have the time to notice the inconsistencies. And at the end of the day, it's just City Skylines. Like, it's absolutely amazing that you can do this in City Skylines, right? So I don't need to apply any like After Effects or whatever. I don't even know how. So this was actually much easier for me to do so. So this scene in particular, I actually do have some plans for refurbishing this entire intersection. And again, I'm kind of, you know, justifying it by doing some kind of damage here, destroying those corner buildings. And I think that when I was building this place, I was even talking about having some plans for that particular corner. So that's the reason why I didn't really detail the backyards too much and put some kind of small, you know, old buildings there, even some like wooden half-timbered house. Well, it's not half-timbered. Is it called that way? I'm not even sure, but some kind of like worse buildings in that corner. So there would be an easier justification to get rid of that. And this was the last shot. This was actually kind of satisfying to make at the end, because I already had everything else done, and I already knew exactly how to do these things, how to animate the vehicles, because I've done that multiple times before. But this is the only case when I actually recorded it. So again, it's actually super easy to do that with procedural objects these days. You're just going to apply the back and forth module, I believe, and you can actually group all of these objects together. You're just going to move the parent of the group, which in this case was the tank's chassis. I just removed the turrets, you know, before for that shot, but you know, by default it's one object. But yeah, you can easily do this, and I made it so that the soldier is actually, you know, like a tank commander, just looking outside the tank. By the way, these are, I think, British soldiers or something, like modern soldiers. So, you know, again, if you look at it for too long, then you are going to start noticing that something is off. But you know, with the zoom levels that we are looking at them, I think it's perfectly fine. I suppose I could have probably recolored them slightly so the uniforms are a bit more gray, but you know, at the end of the day, I think it's absolutely fine. And by the way, in this particular shot, I did a little trick, because you don't see any vehicles on the road, but they are there actually. But the vehicles, I made it with ultimate level of detail, so that they are going to be displayed only at distance of like 1 meter or 5 meters or something. So they are actually there moving on the road, but you don't see them in the cinematics because they are just way too far away from that. And by the way, in some of these shots, you don't even see people. I did that by using the loading screen mod, because there is actually an option where you save the game, load it again, and it's not going to have people. But obviously, if you unpause it, they're going to start, you know, spawning. So I had to just reload the game every time I wanted to record a shot. So that was a bit, you know, time consuming. But anyway, that's all. So those were just little notes about behind the scenes. But next episode, we're going to do some proper building. We're going to repair some of the war damage. All right. So that's going to be next time. Stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching. Hope you like Altengrad still. Hope you're going to like it in the future. And I will see you next time. Goodbye.